At the age of 7, Arthur here decided to get in his first ever fight. Brawled with the neighbor's dog, another large male, for about 20 seconds before I could get there and break it up. So what was it like, Arthur? Enjoy yourself? Well, you will have to get in a very long line. We're covering LSU football, recapping the Tigers' 2024 season, and talking New Orleans Saints. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and this here is some Bayou football. Sup? Welcome all to episode 12 of the Bayou Football video podcast. I am Ruddy Rutledge, and he is the main character, Arthur the Bayou Party Dog. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, we were not able to put out a show last week. And for those curious, no, it wasn't because of Arthur's fight. He didn't get his butt whipped bad enough to miss a show. But we are back this week for episode 12. Since our last show, the day before Thanksgiving, the LSU football brand has undergone quite the series of events. First, the Tigers pimp-slapped Oklahoma. And in that game, wideout Chris Hilton showed up, finally, and showed out. Garrett Nussmeier did his best Freddy Krueger impression, returning from the dead and slashing up the Sooners in his bloodlust. Also, the Saints were knocked back down to earth, again, with a loss to the Rams, but then they got back in the win column with a road victory over the New York Giants. But first, let's talk some Tigers. Okay, on Sunday, following the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's final reveal of the first ever 12-team playoff field, the LSU Tigers then learned that they will be sent to Houston for New Year's Eve, where they will take on the Fighting Dave Arandas of Baylor University in the Texas Bowl. What a boring matchup. I know it's Dave Aranda, former defensive coordinator at LSU, won a national title here. That'll be the storyline. But I wanted Michigan in the Music City Bowl. But we will have a preview of LSU's bowl matchup with Baylor in a future episode. Before Sunday's bowl announcement, one enormous piece of news after another rolled in for Brian Kelly's program. To start, the Tigers signed a fine recruiting class last Wednesday. Didn't get all the players that were officially committed to LSU the day before, as five-star cornerback Cade Phillips was bought off. Decided that Texas was a better fit for his future than LSU. But that's how the ball rolls in college football's new all-about-me era. And what do you know? The Tigers turned around and got a five-star flip of their own on signing day, stealing offensive tackle Solomon Thomas from Florida State. This class may not have been the class LSU wanted, losing Phillips and Michigan quarterback Bryce Underwood to last-minute flips. But it was a class LSU needed. The class headliner was the nation's number one cornerback, DJ Pickett, out of Florida. And Corey Raymond did work on this one, LSU's DB coach. He really did. This is a player that is the best at his position in the entire country, a position which happens to be a huge need for LSU in terms of upgrading its talent. I believe that Pickett has the talent to be a day one starter in Baton Rouge next season if Brian Kelly would stop making freshmen sit and watch for half a season before they get to play. Hey, coach, they don't have to know every single play in the playbook to get on the field. But that's a conversation for another day. LSU loaded up on linemen in this class, offense and defense. And that's what we want to hear, right, Arthur? Games are won in the trenches in the Southeastern Conference by the big uglies. And it's about time for LSU to get back to pushing people around at the point of attack on both sides of the ball. Now, in the aftermath of signing day, we are smack dab in the middle of transfer portal season. Yippee. LSU's had over a dozen players from its 2024 roster declare their intent to transfer out. And this is not surprising in today's landscape, nor is it uncommon. It's happening everywhere. And yet, you can count on some of LSU's chicken little fans to scream and stomp their feet and cry about how the sky is falling. It's like clockwork. Y'all know LSU can also bring in transfers, right? Brian Kelly said LSU will be looking to bring in around 12 or so. But please, by all means, smash that panic button over some mediocre players. While you're at it, smash that subscribe button. Most notable of the LSU departing transfers is wide receiver C.J. Daniels, who caught 42 passes for the Tigers this season, with no touchdowns. Among the others leaving town are defensive end Deshaun Womack, who, for whatever reason, has simply not been able to put it together, and tight end Kamorian Pimpton, a talented athlete with a huge upside, and for what it's worth, I don't get this one. I don't get his decision to leave, other than maybe he wasn't guaranteed a starting position. Personally, I don't consider C.J. Daniels as big a loss as others apparently do. Not with Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, and Tre'Dez Green set to do the heavy lifting for the LSU receiving corps next season. And I still think LSU will hit the wide receiver position hard in the transfer portal, as well as the tight end spot. LSU needs to hit the portal hard everywhere, in general, this offseason. Tigers went cheap in the portal last year. Let's call it what it is. Call it what it was. They went cheap. And some will say they paid for it with a subpar 2024 season. I think the Tigers' issues this past season went deeper than a few transfers. But with Kelly looking to bring in a big haul of transfers this year, it's looking like the LSU coach is shooting his shot for 2025 in the portal. He better, because 8-4, that ain't it. Not here. That ain't it. Kelly and other higher-ups in the program have been stressing to fans and alumni the need for contributions to LSU's NIL collective, Bayou Traditions. So do your part, guys. Pay up. In other happenings around the program, we now know that offensive tackle Will Campbell and tight end Mason Taylor are both leaving school early to declare for the NFL draft. Some thoughts. Will Campbell has been LSU's starting left tackle since game one of his true freshman season. That's rare. That is extremely rare. And while I won't say he's the best offensive lineman to ever come through Baton Rouge, he's one of the best tackles the school has ever produced. He didn't have the season he wanted this year. That's an understatement. But Will had a stellar season from a pass blocking perspective, and every single mock draft I've seen has him going in the first round. Top 10 in some. Mason Taylor, son of NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, was underrated throughout his time at LSU. By the numbers, as well as the eye test, he is the best tight end that has ever run under that win bar in Tiger Stadium. He's that good. Everyone knows about his game-winning touchdown in overtime to beat Bama his freshman year, but he's been Nussmeier's most reliable pass catcher this season. And in 3 years at LSU, Taylor totaled 129 catches, 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns. And with his ability to both block and catch passes down the field, I'm predicting a long, productive professional career for young Mr. Taylor. Now, the next nuggets of NFL draft news LSU is hoping to receive are that starting quarterback Garrett Nussmeier and right tackle Emory Jones will be returning for their senior seasons. But those announcements are still simmering at the moment, and those decisions have not yet been made. But we're crossing fingers for both Nuss and Big Emory to be back in Baton Rouge in 2025. So it's been quite the eventful stretch here recently for LSU football. And the Tigers will now look to reel in some big fish in the transfer portal as they begin their preparations for their bowl game on New Year's Eve. Arthur is enjoying his break, his mid-show room temperature light beer break. He'll be back. Any recap of LSU's 2024 season has to end with the conclusion that this season was a failure. There's no other way to put it. It was a failure. You went from 10 wins in each of Brian Kelly's first 2 seasons, SEC title game appearance in year 1, Heisman Trophy winner year 2, to 8 wins and 4 losses, 3 in a row at one point. And you missed out on the 12-team playoff. Now, I've said this before on this show, but I'm going to say it again now. LSU considers itself to be a top 12 program in college football. Nobody argues with that. They have top 12 facilities, do they not? Absolutely. They have a top 12 highest paid coaching staff. They have a top 12 NIL collective, a top 12 stadium, a top 12 fan base, top 12 weight room, top 12 nutritional staff, top 12 strength and conditioning staff, top 12 recruiting classes, top 10, top 6, and so on and so on. Well, then there's really no excuse, is it? The Tigers should be a top 12 team in a 12-team playoff. So yeah, this season was basically a failure because they're not in that playoff. And it wasn't a total abject failure. They had some nice wins, but on its face, in a vacuum, as the kids say these days, it was a failure. 8-4, unranked in Brian Kelly's 3rd season. To quote Dr. Robert Doback from Step Brothers, failure. Doesn't mean LSU's destined to fail again next year, though. A lot of freshmen ended up playing big roles in the little 2-game winning streak to end the season. You got a big recruiting class coming in, as we've already discussed. But nobody wants to hear about next year right now. Not after 4 losses. Talking about next year does not negate the failure of this season. So let's get into it. Recapping LSU's 2024 season. We start out with LSU's September the 1st showdown in Las Vegas against the USC Trojans. Everybody was jacked for this one. It was the biggest matchup of the opening weekend of college football. It was the lone Sunday night game. And it was LSU's chance to finally get on the field and knock heads with USC 21 years after being forced to share a national title with the Trojans. Well, LSU lost the game, 27-20. Nussmeier was outgunned by USC's Miller Moss, and LSU dropped its 5th consecutive season opener. If I had told you right then, when that game was over, that USC would go on to lose 6 games and Moss would be benched and entering the transfer portal, you'd probably think I needed my head examined or that I had done a lot of drugs. Well, I have, but that's still how the season played out for the Trojans. The next week, the Tigers slogged through an unimpressive win over Nicholls, and that was followed by a memorable trip to Columbia, South Carolina, where the Tigers escaped by the skin of their teeth, 36-33, after a missed field goal by the homestanding South Carolina Gamecocks. The Cocks took this one hard. They did. Their fans. To this day, on social media, they claim the officials cost them a playoff spot with the late game penalty calls against them. Once again, Cocks, I say this. The calls were correct. Stop breaking the freaking rules. LSU returned home on September 21st to defeat UCLA 34-17 in 100-degree heat. After dominating South Alabama the next week, the Tigers enjoyed an open date before pulling off a memorable overtime upset of Ole Miss in Tiger Stadium at night on October the 12th. Fans rushed the field. It was great. The Rebels really outplayed the Tigers, kind of, in this one, but missed opportunities in the first half really cost Lane Kiffin's boys. And after one too many dime throws by Nussmeier in that second half, the Rebels were reduced to missing dunks on their stupid little sideline basketball goal. They think it's cool, but that thing is so cringe. By the way, could this clown Kiffin possibly complain anymore? Every single week, this guy's on something, about something. He's an annoying crybaby masquerading as this voice of reason for college football. Anything that doesn't benefit little Lane, the victim, is bad for the sport. Enjoy sitting at home for the playoffs, Lane. You missed your window. But I digress. The Tigers used that momentum from the Ole Miss game to put together their finest performance of the season. A 34-10 beatdown of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and LSU was able to carry that momentum to College Station, Texas the next weekend, where they dominated the Aggies in the first half and held a 17-7 lead at halftime in their showdown with A&M on October the 26th. If we could just go back to that moment in time. LSU was sitting pretty at 6-1, 6 straight wins, and was dominating the A&M Aggies in their own stadium. And just as I was finishing up trick-or-treating with my 1-year-old niece, the wheels fell off of the LSU football team. It happened suddenly, and it happened without warning. But whatever went down at halftime in College Station, maybe the Aggies pulled out a Nussmeier voodoo doll. Maybe the whole weird Aggie cult performed a weird Aggie cult ritual. Who knows? Whatever it was, it worked, though, because LSU could do nothing right for almost an entire month after that halftime period. They were blown away in the second half by the Aggies, 38-23, 3 picks from Nussmeier. And after another open date, the Tigers turned in their most awful, most pathetic performance of the Brian Kelly era, as they were humiliated at home, at night, in front of a fired-up Tiger Stadium crowd that was given nothing to cheer about. The final score was Alabama 42, LSU 13, and somehow it seemed even worse than that. 4 more touchdowns on the ground from Bama quarterback Jalen Milroe, who LSU has shown no interest in tackling for 2 straight years. The Tigers then took their tired, lame, uninspired act to Gainesville, Florida the next week, where they officially hit rock bottom, with a double-digit loss to the Gators. But after the longest week ever, LSU clawed its way out of the hole with a home win over Vanderbilt, 24-17. Tiger Stadium patrons enjoyed beautiful weather, fantastic tailgating on this cool fall day. I may or may not have encouraged my buddy's 13-year-old son to hit a TV camera with a water bottle. Something caused the boy to get ejected from the game, and something caused everyone to get mad at me. Good times. And also, unfortunately, LSU committed uniform sacrilege in that game by coming out looking like Edna Karr High School in those cheap-looking yellow jerseys. And a week later, the Tigers closed out their season with a very impressive 37-17 win over Oklahoma in Tiger Stadium as Nussmeier returned to the game after injury to light up the vaunted Sooner defense. So, peaks and valleys, like most seasons. But this is LSU, and there weren't enough peaks, and there were too many valleys. You're top 12 in every measurable major program category. You should have a top 12 football team. Instead, you're unranked in the top 25. Unranked. 4 losses. So yeah, LSU in 2024 was a failure. The season was a failure. Welcome back. The New Orleans Saints bounced back from their loss to the Rams with a 14-11 road win over the New York Football Giants on Sunday to improve to 5-7 on the season. I pretty much jumped off the Darren Rizzi for permanent head coach bandwagon after that Rams loss. I'm not opposed to it, I'm just not on the bandwagon. The Saints were beaten in every phase of the game in that Rams game, and they looked closer to the team that had lost 7 in a row than the energized group that had just won 2 straight. Rallying the team the way Rizzi did in those 2 games is hardly uncommon for an energetic interim coach replacing a lifeless turd like Dennis Allen. But 3 games, 4 games provide us with more of an extended look at how a coach manages peaks and valleys within a season. And in his first big moment with the Saints fighting to stay in the playoff race, in the divisional title race, Rizzi's team folded and didn't hardly compete. The Rams completely dominated the fourth quarter. On Sunday, the Saints' offense really didn't look any better, but their defense was impressive, as it should have been against a 2-10 team playing Drew Lock at quarterback. And yet, New Orleans still almost found a way to blow it in the end. It took a field goal block by defensive lineman Brian Bresee, who's turning into a fantastic football player, for the Saints to eke out the win. Now, big picture, there are 5 games left. The Saints are just 2 games back in the NFC South. The 7-6 Tampa Bay Bucks, who the Saints play in the season's final game, are now sitting on top, having won 3 in a row. A game ahead of the 6-7 Falcons, who have lost 4 in a row and are ready for Kirk Cousins to give back some of that $180 million. But on Sunday, New Orleans quarterback Derek Carr suffered another nasty-looking injury that ended up being a broken hand, and now, guess what? He's out for the season. So this ushers in another extended period of playing time for young quarterbacks Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler. That's not the most ideal scenario for winning games, especially for a team that was clinging ever so slightly to a shot at the playoffs. Now, that chance is most likely gone. But that's about par for the course this season for the Saints. It's Carr's second significant injury. Plus, there were many other injuries, especially on the offensive line. Now, that starting offensive line was intact Sunday against the Giants for the first time since Week 3, although you would never know it looking at how poorly they protected Carr throughout the game. And let's not gloss over another key injury, one that occurred back in the Rams game, and that's the injury to Taysom Hill. This hurt the Saints worse than what anybody in the national media will ever realize. Taysom truly was Mr. Do-Everything for this offense. And without him, the unit looks unimaginative, predictable, sluggish even. It's a shame, really, because given his age, 34, his physical style of play, he's a bull in a china closet, and the fact that it was a torn knee ligament, it's possible, not certain, but just possible that we've seen the last of Taysom Hill in the NFL. And that would be a shame. He was just now, this season, starting to be utilized the way he should have been since he got into the league, Sean Payton. And if he had been utilized properly, like he should have, this guy would be a bona fide superstar. He'd be on the front of cereal boxes. He'd be a Hall of Famer. Might be a Hall of Famer anyway. I don't know. Just look at his numbers. Let's look at the career numbers Taysom Hill has amassed. 99 career receptions, 940 receiving yards, 11 receiving touchdowns, over 2,400 yards rushing at 5.6 yards a carry, 33 rushing touchdowns, 2,300 yards passing with a nearly 64% completion percentage, 11 passing touchdowns, 20 kickoff returns for almost 500 yards, and 19 career tackles. No player in this era has done anything close to that. I'm not sure any player in history has put up numbers like that in such a wide variety of categories. Plus, a specialist, return specialist, Devin Hester, was voted into the Hall of Fame, so it's not out of the question. But even if he doesn't make the Hall, and if he never plays another down for the Saints, remember, a torn ACL is a very long recovery, then here is a nice big tip of the hat to the Stormin' Mormon, Taysom Hill. Fan favorite, great football player. Next up for the Saints on Sunday, the Washington Commanders and star rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels in what should be quite the challenge for Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, and that Saints defense. Also should be quite the challenge for the Saints offense without Derek Carr. I mean, that could get ugly if that offensive line does not play better. So what about you, Arthur? You ready to get in another dog fight? No? He ain't about that life. For Arthur, the Bayou Party Dog, I'm Ruddy Rutledge. Please like and subscribe. He is a real good boy, and this is some Bayou football.